So our first question is, when and how did you first become a human rights educator?
Um, well, this is all I've ever done. My whole background of study was my degrees are in Southern racial history, and not just U.S. history, but Southern and racial history. Um, so human rights has been probably consistent to me since I was 7 years old. When I saw a racially motivated act of violence in front of me that culminated in a fatality. And I knew then, at least that was my epiphany, that I didn't know about human rights, I knew about civil rights, that I wanted to work for a society and a state and a country and a world that didn't have this anger and violence that I had just witnessed. I heard about human rights when I was 18 and studying in Paris. It's a good year in 1968 to be 18 and in Paris. But I heard about Amnesty International. And in my travels while I was in Europe, I went to many Holocaust sites in both Western and Eastern Europe. And I knew then that I wanted to bring people to those sites. And I'm a historian. I knew nobody was talking about the Holocaust in 1968, but the modern human rights movement comes from what happened in World War II and the Holocaust. So I knew even at 18 that I wanted to teach and I wanted to bring people to those places. And when I learned of amnesty and learned of human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, uh, that's what I geared myself towards. So all of my studies, my master's degree, my doctorate, my research has all been geared towards aspects of human rights education. So it's really all I've ever done. I guess this is a long-winded answer to say my epiphany was at 7, but it dawned on me that I could do it when I was 18.
Yes, that's amazing that you had a start at such an early age. I don't think that I was first introduced to human rights education probably until college. And so, yes, if we could even get it in the curriculum in high school, I think that would be a great progression.
Well,
Um,
that's clearly needed.
yes. Um, the second question we have is to describe, and you did a little bit about this already, your human rights education and training work.
Well, because this didn't exist when I was your age going through my university training, I can say I really didn't have any formal training in it per se. Um, well, I came here to SMU where I teach, and I came here in January of 1985. And I had been a member of Amnesty since 1971. And this kind of came together um, in the following way. I started going to Poland by myself in 1983 when I was still teaching at Auburn. And knowing that as I say, I wanted to bring people there. And I continued that when I came to Dallas in 85. In the late 1980s, Nancy Flowers, and I was in human rights education within Amnesty USA, brought several folks to her home out in California for what I believe she called a Human Rights Education Institute 101. And she brought people with various expertise in different subjects to write curriculum. And I was asked to go and to write a curriculum relevant to the death penalty, which is an area of research for me. And so I did that. And then in 1989, I got on the board of Amnesty USA, and I proposed to my departmental chair here at SMU. I put together a human rights course, and I'm very fortunate in that he was amenable to me offering this course, quote, on a trial run to see if there might be interest. And I think I was overly brash in telling him that of course there'd be interest because young people care about these interests. The long and the short of it is, I started teaching this course then, and I've offered it. That's really all I teach now. And then in the I hope, can I keep going with this? Because I know this is, I'm not trying to be long winded, but this is all part of a progression.
No, yes, please continue.
Okay, so I was still going to Poland, and I finally started taking groups of people to Poland in December of 1996. I took 4 of us went, myself, another colleague, and 2 students. And I've gone to Poland every year since. And word got out that people could go to Holocaust sites in Poland. And in 2005, when I went, a graduate student of mine, I didn't know who she was. I did not know that she came from a well-to-do family here in Dallas. A single mom, she took her 2 sons with her, an SMU student and a high school junior. All 3 of them went. And unbeknownst to me at the time, she had a profound and a transformative experience in the camps in Poland. And when we came back in January, but in February 2006, she and her sister met with me and said they wanted to give a monetary gift to SMU to create an undergraduate human rights program, and what I consider being the director of it. And my jaw dropped, and I said to her, I've waited my whole life to hear that question. You're darn right I'll do it. I'm pretty sure I know how to do this. And so the human rights program here started on July the 1st, 2006. And I became the director of it then. I still am in that position. And I can talk more about the program itself later, but that really is my training from developing courses and going to Nancy Flower's home and coming through winter after winter in Poland to create a human rights program.
I definitely want to ask Nancy more about the institute that she held at her home. That sounds awesome. I love that.
She had David Scheinman and some of the rock stars of human rights education were out at her house. I'm not in that group, but she had some power people out there for sure.
And your program where you go to Poland, I did my undergrad at Wittenberg University in Ohio. And one of the political science professors that I had, Dr. Heather Wright, she also takes groups of kids to Poland and to study the politics of the Holocaust. And her husband is also a professor there, and he goes with her with his own group of students, and he's in the psychology department. And they, have that amazing trip together. So I think that you would really enjoy.
Feel free to do an email introduction, or I'm happy to certainly chat. Do you know what time of the year they go?
Yes, I think it's in August.
Yeah, we go every year from December 17th to the 30th.
Okay.
And the goal was specifically to go then, so when people went, they would not physically be comfortable. When we started going, it was 30 and 40 below, and it was punishing to be there. It was just so cold, but that was the point of not wanting to be able to wear shorts and be comfortable. But I'd love to meet and chat with either or both of them about their experiences and how long they've been doing that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Um, and our next question is, why do you think human rights education and training is important?
That's like asking, why do I think we should breathe?
Mhm.
Uh, this is this is, in my very biased opinion, the central issue in human rights, which is human rights education. Every aspect of human rights invariably is a human rights education issue, regardless of who you're speaking with, whether it's people who are 4, 5, and 6 years old, just beginning their elementary schooling, whether it's people in secondary schools, universities, or people, most of whom, of course, have never had this pedagogy. You can't talk about human rights without educating people to try and inform them of the context in which all of this did happen and is happening and is going to happen. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It's all part of a historical continuum. So without teaching human rights education, I know this is a global issue and not just an American issue, but speaking as an American educator, this is the biggest single failure in education today, not teaching human rights. There is no reason in 2023 why we should have students being educated anywhere in this country who, after their education is complete, can still say the dangerous phrase, I didn't know. It's our job as human rights educators to help students in general, help students in particular, and society in general to eliminate this phrase, I didn't know, from their vocabulary. So this is the goal. To have mandatory, and I know I'm biased, but this should be mandatory education for every generation of our students. These kids are going to be running this country pretty soon, and they're going to be running your cities, our states, this world, or portions of it, and they should have a greater knowledge of what the hell has happened in this country and globally and what is happening, so that we can fulfill the promise of Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all people are entitled to a fundamental inherent right to a life with dignity and rights. And that's our job. And that is our job, is to make human rights education mandatory in schools in this country. That's our job. And anything short of that is not acceptable.
I absolutely agree with you. And I know that students are definitely yearning and interested in learning more about this. And even at the elementary level, my mom is a second grade teacher in Central Ohio. And her and I spoke at length about the students coming to her last year when Russia invaded Ukraine, and they had all sorts of questions like, where are they going to go? Are they safe? Is it okay for them to leave? And so that, of course, leads right into human rights. And that was a great introduction for them to learn about that for the first time.
Sure, little children certainly don't need to know the particulars of graphic violence, but little children certainly know about bullying and being picked on and being targeted merely because of who they are or who they allegedly are, whether they wear glasses like you and I, whether they're female, whether they're who they are. They understand what it means to be targeted, and we have to talk about it, despite the stupidity of some of our elected leaders that don't want to face the past for fear of shame or guilt. But this is immoral. It's outrageous. This is just an FYI, if I may. There's no reason why you should know of this in Ohio, but it's a big deal here in 2 weeks in Dallas. You can Google this for yourself. The name of Santos Rodriguez. I was here in Dallas 50 years ago when this happened, 1973, July the 24th. 12-year-old Hispanic boy and his brother taken out of their grandfather's home at 2:30 in the morning in their pajamas and handcuffed and put into a police car. Santos in the right front, the officer behind him, and Santos's brother in the left seat next to the officer. Falsely accused of breaking into a nearby gas station the day before and robbing it of $8 of coins, in which both boys professed their innocence. This was Rodney King before Rodney King and George Floyd before George Floyd. The officer put a gun to the back of Santos's head to force him to confess. And Santos's last words were, "I am innocent." And the officer blew his head off, just assassinated him in the police car. And it led to the only race riot in Dallas 4 days later, July 28th. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of this. This is arguably the greatest crime in Dallas other than the JFK killing. And I mention this for this reason. Not that it is a big deal in Ohio, although to me it should be, but I ask my students every semester, how many of you are from Dallas? And I'd say a quarter to half my class raises their hands. How many of you have ever heard of the Santos Rodriguez killing? Almost nobody. It's beyond disgraceful that this isn't even taught in this city. I just sent a long op-ed to the Dallas Morning News about the 50th anniversary, which is coming up, as I say, and they're going to print it, I think, this week or next week. And the editorial board had no clue of the Santos Rodriguez thing. So it's just it's not just education for our students. When you have to educate the editorial board of the only paper in the fifth largest city in the country about a crime that was so shocking 50 years ago, there's something seriously wrong here. And this is why human rights education must be inclusive in our schools so that when these kids grow up, and some of them are going to end up working for the Dallas Morning News, as adults, they don't have to say, "I don't know what you're talking about," in something that happened in their city.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm only aware of it because of the master's program that I'd completed in human rights, but without that, I don't think that I probably would have been aware of it either. But please send us your op-ed for us to read. That would be great.
I will.
Okay.
I'll be when they publish it, I'll be happy to send it to you.
Okay, thank you. And yes, speaking of anniversaries, this year is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I wanted to ask what human rights accomplishments you're most proud of, and maybe that is the wonderful department that you've created at your university, and what recommended action would you like to see happen?
Well, for sure, I'd be more than a liar if that wasn't at the top of my list. So the human rights program, but I say it was a quirk. It wouldn't have happened without running into the two sisters, Laura and Embry, who took my course. But the human rights program is by far something I'm very proud of. At that time, we were the 5th university in the country to have an undergraduate degree program. Today, there are 9. So what would I like to happen? What would I like to see happen? There's over 5,000 colleges and universities in this country. So I'd like to see every university, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year university, offer this pedagogy. This stuff should be as common as studying anything else, whatever it is, English, history, psychology, business, engineering. It doesn't matter. This is a pedagogy which has to be incorporated throughout our educational system. So that to me is what what the goal is. And I think it's imperative for educators, both within HRE USA and elsewhere, those not in HRE, that this has to be disseminated into our schools, public and private, as widely as possible so it becomes a norm. This, to me, should be the primary commitment of educators in this country, is to get this pedagogy into as many schools as possible. That's the goal. I think that would pay tribute to all of those people who were the victims through no fault of their own in World War II and beyond, who died because of who they were or who they allegedly were. Everybody who's targeted, this is what we should be doing to honor those people, so that their deaths were not in vain. And the best way to have them not be in vain is to have a world created where every student anywhere in the world, from Rwanda to Uganda to Mexico to Australia to anywhere, Yemen, every country in the world, students can understand about dignity, decency, and human rights. That's the goal. The tagline of our human rights program, to me, is the essential truth of human rights epitomized in the singular phrase, "There's no such thing as a lesser person." And that should be what we're striving for, that realization that all people, regardless of who they are entitled to a life with dignity and rights.
With your students at the university, for the 75th anniversary, is there any special projects or assignments that you're working on together?
Yeah, it's actually started last year, and of course my incoming students don't know it yet. Last year, I had several students work on the issue of the death penalty, because, as you know, Texas leads the free world in killing people. And I had students who participated in the World Congress in the death penalty, to end the death penalty, in Berlin, and are still working on issues pertinent to the death penalty. And when they come back in August, we start August 21st, they're going to be working on several themes. That is among them. All of my students, every semester, and I've been teaching this course since 1990, so it's a long time. Muhammad Ali once said, "It ain't bragging if it's so." Well, I have the world's largest collection of both human rights student-generated music and art, because in every class since 1990, and I teach multiple classes a semester, grad and undergrad, all of my students have had to, one, create 80 minutes of human rights music or speeches. It started on cassette tapes, and then it went to CDs, and now it's on flash drives. But to get them, because music is a universal language of struggle, and they have to put in music or speeches, no more than 3 songs per artist, or no more than 3 speeches per artist. And they all have to do something creative, artistic. It could be a drawing, a painting. I have stuff that's ceramics, stuff that's in stained glass, poetry, photography. I have the world's largest collection. It's several thousand pieces of student-generated human rights artwork. And with the anniversary of the UDHR coming this year, normally I don't put any qualifiers on what their music or artwork can be. It's up to them, totally up to them. And much of it, as you might imagine, is very personal, whether it's students coming out or young women talking about sexual assault or worse. But this year, this semester, the art is going to be centered around the UDHR. So I don't know what I'm going to get, but it's going to be UDHR related.
I love that. I one of my courses that I took was advancing human rights through the arts, and it was one of my absolute favorites. That's yes, I would be so interested in seeing some of your students' collection. That's a
It's
really
it's if you ever get down here to Dallas, I think we have a book. One of our administrator may have a book on it, but I'll see if I can also send you some photos or photos of my office, because my office and our suite of offices looks like a mini museum of gallery of art stuff. Some of this stuff is unbelievable in its talent. As many of these students are, of course, artistically powerful. I had a student in 2005 who was from New Orleans, whose city was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And his artwork, if I can take 30 seconds and tell you, to me it was just breathtaking. He took the Led Zeppelin song "When the Levee Breaks." If you're not familiar with it, listen to it. It's a great 8-minute Led Zepp song. And he took film footage of TV newscasts before the hurricane got to New Orleans, talking about what was coming, newscasts as the hurricane battered his city, and newscasts after the storm left when the city was basically destroyed. And he made a music video of New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina to the Led Zepp song "When the Levee Breaks." But I'm just saying, these are the kinds of creative things that are personal. I mean, this was his city. So yeah, I'm happy to try and send you some photos of this artwork. It's breathtaking, and I don't use that word lightly. It's breathtaking.
yes. Oh my gosh, that's great. I would be so happy if you would share some of that with us. And Christy. Yes. Um, so how has your connection to HRE USA made a difference to you?
Well, this is the central reason of who I am and what I do. So, HRE is great because clearly I get to meet super people. I'm looking at two of them. But I get to meet super people who are doing this work across this country in relative anonymity, sometimes in states where this is hard to do. But these are the people, to me, who are the true heroes of this country, working to help prepare generations of young people to get beyond politics and to understand that all people are entitled to dignity. Education doesn't cost, it pays. And this is the dividend that we hope to reap. These HRE USA educators are phenomenal in the people they impact, whether they know it or not, and the lives that they help shape, some of whom are going to become educators themselves. And we'll point to the teachers in HRE USA as the men and women who help shape their lives. How much better can it get?
Yes, and I've only been a part of it for a couple of months, but I already know that I want to remain involved.
Welcome to it.
Yes, thank you. Um, and so I spoke briefly about our Youth in Action Awards that we're launching this summer. And for the first year, our theme is promoting democracy, protecting human rights. And what does that theme mean to you?
Well, it clearly means that human rights has a better opportunity to function. I won't say flourish, but it can function better, ideally, in states, countries which, in principle, if not in practice, respect the idea that people are entitled to a life with dignity and rights. and don't make it a priority to suppress people's rights merely because of who these people are. So it's how the law is used. Is the law used as a shield to protect all people in the name of the law so that rights can ideally function and flourish? This is good. Or is the law used as a sword to remove certain groups of people from the protection of the law to make them vulnerable to attack in the name of the law? So it's trying to link in young people's minds that democratic governments, while flawed, are still clearly better and ideally less repressive than other systems whose aim is to suppress and target and even liquidate people because of who they are. So it's just trying to help make rights flourish in the best environment possible.
Yes, that's a wonderful answer. And I'm just thinking because the awards are based in individuals and groups in the US, Nancy certainly chose a timely theme for the first launch. And so I'm really excited to see what sort of submissions that we.
Well, that's why she's the queen of human rights education.
Yeah. Yes, I'll let her know you said that. I love that. Um, and the final question, are there any other human rights education organizations that you work with or know of that you would recommend for us to connect with about the awards?
Well, yeah, one group that I work with here, and they're certainly nationwide, and you may already be working with them, is the World Affairs Council. And, they're everywhere. And as a subsection of the World Affairs Council, they have what are called Junior World Affairs Council, JWACs. And they work in schools all over this country. And I was at a meeting with them yesterday, speaking to 75 educators promoting the World Affairs Council, but promoting human rights within the World Affairs Council. So I would definitely recommend that educators become familiar with, if they're not already, with their local or state, but ideally local, World Affairs Council and the Junior World Affairs Council in their state or their city, their community. There's a lot of religious education, whatever the religion is, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, other. There's no shortage of private schools to work with and to talk about human rights in these contexts, and I would recommend that. And clearly, I think it's imperative to work with a group, for want of a better phrase, I would call it indigenous rights education, because all of us, of course, are, unless we are indigenous in part or in whole, we're on overwhelmingly their land. And I think it would be significant to include indigenous organizations where one works. There's a main organization across the country called Indigenous Country Today, and they put out news every day. Their ICT is what they go by, Indigenous Country Today. But I think it's important to not keep indigenous people invisible. And it's easy for them, especially for the majority of our population, which is Anglo, to have indigenous communities be invisible, but they're in our midst, and they're in rural communities, and they're in our major cities, such as here in Dallas and elsewhere. And I think it would be immoral to not reach out to indigenous community. Yeah, I think it's important that, again, generically to the average American, and certainly the average Anglo American, Native people are invisible in our society and in our history. They shouldn't be, of course, but they generically are. And history, of course, our history has to include them, has to include everybody, but it certainly should include the indigenous history of wherever these educators are, whether it's in Texas, Ohio, or any of the 50 states. There are indigenous groups everywhere, and they should be consulted and have a say.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. And that's something that I will talk to Nancy and Yvonne about to make sure that they're represented in our outreach for the awards.
And, and I would just add maybe one other thing regarding that. Of
Yeah.
course, not everybody has access to computers. We may take them for granted, but lots of students in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and this isn't so much a race issue to me as it is an economic issue, a poverty issue. The poor have always been marginalized in this country, in every country, but in this country. And that poor doesn't have to equate to all negative aspects of human existence. There are great students and great educators in less funded areas. And just because they don't have access to computers doesn't mean that they don't share the fervor for human rights education. So I would just urge, as far an outreach as is possible, to certainly include areas in which this technology might not be prevalent.
Yes, that's
and I'll just even mention that last year's Human Rights Educators USA Human Rights Award on Human Rights Day went to the International Indigenous Peoples, or I'm sorry, the International Indian Treaty Council, the Treaty Council organization, and was recognized a number of the leadership within that community. So we definitely want to continue to make sure that, as you've pointed out, the indigenous voices and to human rights is really essential.
Yeah, it's indispensable. Yeah.
Those are the questions that I had sent you ahead of time for you to prepare, but do you have any other stories, words of wisdom that you want to share, maybe about your experience with HRE, or otherwise in your career?
Well, I'm thrilled. As I say, yeah, I've worked with HRE a while now, a long time, both in the inner workings of HRE and I guess what I would say here on the periphery. I mean, whenever I am introduced, I get to speak a lot, but really I define myself as I'm a human rights educator. That's really all I've done. That's who I am. So to me, working with HRE USA just yesterday, as I say, when I was speaking to these educators within the World Affairs Council, and the first thing I mentioned was HRE USA, and they put the website up on the board, and they're all taking notes. So hopefully there'll be a lot more folks signing up, or maybe have. I hope so. It's what I stress everywhere, and especially to other educators. There's no reason for any educator, at the very least, not to be aware of HRE USA, and they should, of course, all be in HRE USA. But one of the things that I think we really have to do is to train teachers about human rights, because clearly not all teachers, they're like anybody else. If they're not exposed to human rights, then they're limited in what they can offer. So the training of teachers is as essential as the educating of our students. And anything that can be done to help train more teachers within this pedagogy should be a priority. And I'm just honored to know and work with this group. It's I know that sounds hokey, but it's really the truth.
Well, and I'll mention that one of Rick's students, Julie Rinker, actually became our very first teacher educator fellow last summer, and was just a joy, and I know was inspired by your teaching, Rick, to keep on doing this as she's teaching in the classroom now. So it's really remarkable. And one other anecdote is I remember, and this would probably have been the early 1990s, when we didn't have Zoom at that time. So we were trying to do a teleconference. I don't know if you remember this. It was when Amnesty's annual general meeting was down in Dallas. And so you, I think somehow maybe Patrick Manson got some teacher, you had the panel there, and we wired it up to the University of Minnesota. So we had this cross teacher training, learning kind of thing.
I remember that. It was 1992. Yeah, 92 or 92. Yeah, 93. Yeah. Boy, I had forgotten that until you said that, but boy, those were the old days, pre-technology, where it took that kind of ingenuity and expertise to make something like that doable. Yeah.
Well, and I am here committed to trying to help create, because I've been passionate about creating a National Human Rights Museum. So I think all of your archival music, arts, we've got to figure out how to potentially get a lot of that into an archival digital human rights museum space. Are you on for that?
Which one of my arms do you want to twist? Yeah, I think a National Human Rights Museum is so long overdue, but when, I won't say if, but when it comes into existence, I've got stuff that can help begin to fill it with however big it's going to be. Yeah.
We'll start with the Digital Human Rights Museum. That's my so a part of this, and I'm just so, Meredith, it's been wonderful. Your storytelling is, because a part of what I think we need to do is capture these amazing stories of individuals like you, Rick, who've been in this for a long time, and Meredith, you who, we're talking about your own lived experiences and how they intersect so much with Rick's experiences. So I really think, at least for me, it keeps me going hearing your stories.
So just a few years ago, it was during right prior to COVID, here in Dallas, they opened up what is the world's, not just America's only, but the world's first Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And I think it will be a portent of other similar museums to come. So it's not just a Holocaust museum, which we had, but it was a new museum to add human rights as a portion of the post-World War II, post-Holocaust world. So it's, and a lot of my students have volunteered down there. They all have to do a minimum 20 hours every semester in a local human rights agency here in Dallas to get out of the classroom. All of the docents have been with us to Poland in various years. So it's a pretty effective place. It's a phenomenal place, the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And they host a lot of human rights events that are not specific to the Holocaust, but are clearly pertinent to the struggle for human rights.
Wonderful. And I think there's a number of sites of conscience. And I think that that museum is a part of it. And so then the question is, can we create some supporting areas around this global in our global digital museum that could somehow connect up a lot of these resources?
Well, you let me know when this thing goes digital, because I can send you more stuff than you can shake a stick at.
Okay, well, we'll have to work on this idea. And can I throw out one more idea?
Of course,
or at least that's rooted maybe in actually what started some of your work around the music. Because I am determined, even though it won't be the 1988 human rights concerts globally, but I am interested in trying to encourage, at least in the US, and if we can, push it out wider for local communities to have human rights concerts again. And so in Nashville, we're having a conversation with Amnesty's local chapter there on the 21st of this month, because that's where the National Council for the Social Studies will be having their conference this year, and on December 1st through the 4th. So we're talking about maybe pulling off a November 30th human rights concert. But I just wondered if you were involved in Amnesty's early human rights concerts in any way, shape, or form, and what you can tell us about that power of those
yeah.
tours.
I remember the Conspiracy of Hope tour, the Human Rights Now tour. I still have T-shirts from them. They're probably collector's items by now. I remember, the group then, I think it's still called Artists for Amnesty, that Angie Hugas still works with up in your neck of the woods up there in Wisconsin, where she's from. But I remember when I was on the board and Jack Healy got those concerts with the Human Rights Now concert. I remember literally Amnesty's membership went from 240,000 to almost 425,000 in the span of a few months. And overwhelmingly, they were young students, they were kids, attracted to and addicted to this phenomenal music of Peter Gabriel, Sting, Tracy Chapman, and a whole host of others. Springsteen in his early years. Amnesty didn't know, it was overwhelmed. The organization did not have the wherewithal to absorb all those people. Many of them stayed and many of them left because there just wasn't an avenue for them. That they almost doubled the size of the organization almost within the span of a few months. But it brought in a fervor and it linked something universal, which is ideally young people, music. And as I said, all music all forms of music are struggles for dignity. Whatever the form of music is, from rap to classical to head-banging, metal-pounding acid rock to Nashville country twang, it doesn't matter, hip-hop, it's all relevant to human rights themes. So yeah, I remember the Conspiracy of Hope tour and the tour that specifically went to Chile, where the concert was in the soccer stadium where an American had been killed, the film Missing, and some political prisoners were released. I had been an exchange student in high school to Santiago, Chile in 1966. And then when Pinochet came to power, my Chilean family couldn't do enough for me. They were so nice. They took me from one end of Chile to the other, to Peru, to Argentina. They had 2 sons and a daughter, and 4 of the 5 members of that family were killed by Pinochet's security forces. And the 5th one of the sons, was able to go back to relatives in Germany. That was really my first. I'd seen terrible things in the South, but it was my family, my Chilean family. And as I say, 4 of them were killed. So when that concert came and Sting did They Dance Alone, and in that soccer stadium, surrounded by Pinochet's troops, with the threat of violence that mercifully did not materialize, uh, human rights and music and the power of music was brought home to me in a very powerful way as to what music really can do beyond inspire people. It can bring change. And it's part of the reason why I made it mandatory in my classes, because I saw the power of youth and music, whatever that music was. Yeah, so that's really, it was a personal experience, but a personal loss that led me to incorporate that in my own classes. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, those are
reasons, but
yeah, it was the struggle for human rights, and anybody, of course, anybody that you are going to do these interviews, all people in human rights have stories which are both, I think they cover the full spectrum of the human experience, from personal grief and tragedy with these issues to triumph and ecstasy of success in seeing people and countries get better. And it's an endurance contest to do this work, but it's the most rewarding work there is. And you had a head start, Meredith. Your mom is a teacher, boy. I'm sure she's proud of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll give you a piece of hokey advice.
Yes,
don't ever miss a chance to wrap your arms around your mom and dad and tell them to their face and ears how much you love them, because they helped make you you. And what you have is a gift. All people should have it, but they don't. But you have it. And you shouldn't never hesitate to let your folks know that they did you right. They did good.
thank you, Rick. You're gonna make me cry.
I'm not trying to make you cry. I'm just trying to tell you that, my mom's fixing to be 101 in September, and I'm lucky that I still get to talk to her and let her know what she means. Because when they're gone, no regrets. Don't think, man, I should have done it. Your parents are young enough and alive enough, and let them hear it ad nauseum. Let them hear it.
Yeah, mine are 91, and I agree with that sentiment.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that.
They did you right, young lady.
Thank you.
Well, I hope, as I said in my email, I hope this was of some help with what you were hopeful of getting and looking for.
Oh, and, yes, beyond that. Thank you.
Whatever you need. If I can be of any help, of course, it's no imposition on me. Let me know. And I'm not offended if you don't. It's okay. But if I can be of any help to you, let me know.
Thank you so much.
Yes. I have my homework to send you both the op-ed and hopefully some artwork if I can get photos of it. But I'll send you the op-ed for sure. And
yes, please do. That would be great.
Keep me abreast as to, what's the chronology of all of this that you're doing? Well, how does this fit into what you're looking for?
Well, I'm really hoping that this leads to more, because this is definitely the kind of work that I want to be involved with long term. My grad program planted that seed.
Where'd you do your grad work?
The University of Arizona.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then I'm not surprised you were doing a master's in human rights out there.
Yes. Yep. So yeah.
Do you know Bill Simmons? Okay. Yeah.
You do? Yes. He's wonderful.
Yeah. We tout Arizona and some other programs, San Francisco, and all the programs that have MAs, Columbia. We urge our students. We've submitted a plan for both an MA and a PhD program here at SMU, which were accepted. But they're trying to endow the undergrad program first before they launch the MA and PhD program. So we're hopeful that gets done soon, because we really want the goal. When I met with the people who gave the money, I said from day one, my goal is to have a BA, MA, and PhD program in human rights. Somebody should be able to come here and study at any level, undergrad or graduate, and in human rights. So that's really the goal. But yeah, I'm thrilled you went to Arizona. Yeah.
Yes, they had just launched the undergrad program right when I was finishing too last
Good
year.
timing.
That's really exciting.
So ideally, in an ideal sense, what's next? You staying in Ohio, or you looking for anything? What are you doing?
Well, I just bought a house in Ohio, so I'll probably be here for a little bit. But yes, definitely open to anything that might come my way. So,
Well, if we are ever successful in getting the MA and PhD programs, I'll send you a note, so maybe you'll consider teaching here.
oh, thank you. Yes, I've thought about doing a PhD program too. Just a matter of finding one where maybe if it could be hybrid or online. But yeah.
Kudos to you, young lady. Christy, what do you got for the rest of the summer and beyond?
Well, I was just not, I don't want to be pushing. I did a hybrid online kind of version of my PhD, which was the leadership for intercultural and international education. So I just finished. I don't know if you know, Rick, I just defended my PhD in May. So
congrats, Doc.
The defense. Thanks.
Congrats. I did not know. So kudos to you.
And around human rights education, and storytelling in this midst, stories as theories, as we say.
That's great. Congrats.
And I interviewed human rights educators who've been in the field in the Philippines and the U.S.
Wow.
Indigenous,
wow.
non-Indigenous perspectives. So.
Let me know when you have the book launch.
Oh, thanks. I will if that happens. But I'm trying to. I did say I've got to create this digital storytelling kind of museum with human rights. So we'll figure out what that really looks like.
Yeah, for sure. If and when, not if, but when you talk to Nancy, ask her about that summer institute. But there's no shortage of stories there. That's for sure.
Well, and I was realizing, because I think, was that the very first notebook series of amnesties? So I have that actually. I have a copy of those old versions. Of course, I have the Museum for Human Rights Education, both at my home as well as in the archives of the University of Minnesota. I think the largest human rights education archives on curriculum. But I had those very first ones, and Nancy has, after that, I mean, there was a series of a number of institutes again at Nancy Flower's house in Bolinas when she had that, and David Shyman's at the University of Vermont for the 50th anniversary. 25 years ago, we did the Human Rights Here and Now, Meredith, that first curriculum in the human rights education series that we developed in human rights education.
Yeah, these two giants in human rights, literally at opposite ends of the country. From Vermont.
Yeah, I know, but it is, isn't it amazing? Yeah, you have David. Well, and one little note here, we're being recorded. But when I was working in high school, and we had this human rights task force, because we had merged some schools and there was some discrimination happening. I went back through some notes that I was finding, and someone had recommended, and this would have been 1981 or 82. Oh, we need to talk to David Shyman out at the University of Vermont. And I'm like, oh, this is before I officially knew him and obviously spent the rest of my life with him. But Yeah, people like Rick, Meredith, Rick, Nancy, and David, and Bill Pernickies. I mean, a lot of these
Yep.
folks were in those very early years of the 80s in Amnesty spheres. I came in
Yep.
at the end of 80s or
Yep. I was
87.
doing this in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana before I came to Texas in 1985 and talking about human rights in those states. Uh, it was challenging, would be putting it mildly, and sometimes threatening. As nobody wanted to hear about those kinds of things. Nobody wanted to hear about the death penalty. Nobody wanted to hear about race. Nobody wanted to hear about it in those years in my part of that part of the country where I'm from, just the deep rural South. It was a lone struggle. There wasn't many people talking about this in that part of the region of the country then.
Well, here's a question. So Rick, I remember, no, thanks for our history, Meredith. I'm jumping back to 1992 when we did the mock trial of Christopher Columbus here in Minnesota. And at that time, I'm just struck. It was 31 years ago, and that same, the pushback on critical race theory and almost the exact context, obviously or at least similar contexts and pushbacks that we're facing in our country right now, were happening back then.
Yeah.
And so even the language of critical race theory, I mean, it was what was being pushed at. So here's an idea around the 75th, because there's no one better. I mean, you and Nancy both, are rooted in the South. Were you born in Louisiana? Or where were you?
Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. So, I mean, there's obviously, we continue to see a lot of pushback, both with legislation and now the pushback within schools around what can and cannot be taught. Do you have ideas, or so we have our Training as Action series that we are going to be running in the fall for HRE USA. And I guess I'm thinking of, thinking about something maybe that can really be working with teachers in the South, or maybe just teachers who are facing the backlash in particular, and having educators like you and Nancy, and others, talk together. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what kind of actions of support might be the best to try and.
I'm certainly happy I'm happy to chat with any educators about these issues, because you're correct, sadly, that they hadn't changed. I think when people heard then, and even now, when they hear the phrase human rights, this image, especially in this part of the country, pops into their mind of liberal, critical, woke, these buzzwords. I stress in my classes the opening night, I'm not pro-Democrat, I'm not pro-Republican, but I am fanatically pro-human rights. This isn't a Republican or Democratic thing, it's a human thing. And it doesn't matter what party you belong to, or what color your skin is, or what religion you are, or what your orientation is, you're a human being. And under Article 1 of the UDHR, to me, we stress here dignity. We have two main components of our program. One, the Holocaust, because I'm a historian, and as I said, that's the historical antecedents of the modern human rights movement, and gender violence, because most human rights issues, sadly, involve violence against gender/identity. Most, not all, but most. And violence, of course, is an affront to dignity. And I don't think we've done a really good enough job, this is just my opinion, emphasizing Article 1 of the UDHR, which says, of course, all people are entitled to a fundamental right to a life with dignity and rights. And the word dignity comes before the word rights. And once somebody's dignity is either violated or not respected and not upheld, you're already talking about human rights issues because you're violating the basic structure of a human being, which is their right to dignity. So to me, to speak with educators is to try to get this embedded that this is a dignity issue. Any human rights issue is a dignity issue. In its most basic form, it's a dignity issue. So I see we have 5 minutes or less. So thanks for that. I think we should harp on the concentration of what can we do to promote dignity as a fundamental concern to get to the basic elements of rights of living. They're dignity issues. Mm-hmm. It's just a thought. Before we get to any of the other 29 articles, there's still dignity issues at heart.
I like that. Yeah. Both the simplicity and people can all connect, I think, to that term dignity.
Yes, that's a really good way of phrasing it, actually. I think I might steal that.
That's what our t-shirts say. Demand dignity.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And on the back, it says our tagline, there's no such thing as a lesser person. And if somebody is not in agreement with either the front message of demand dignity or the back, then you're dealing with somebody that's in dire need of human rights education.
Yes, absolutely.